In this video for lesson 5.4, we're going to be using properties of isosceles triangles to solve problems. So we are going to head to page 140 in your student journal. On page 140, we just want to review our base angles theorem and the base angles converse theorem. So these theorems tell us that in an isosceles triangle, if the two sides or the two legs are congruent, then you know angle B has to be congruent to angle C. The two base angles have to be congruent as well. The converse says the exact same thing, but the opposite. It says if you have a triangle and you notice that two angles are congruent to each other, it means it's isosceles and that the sides opposite those two angles are congruent. And so what we can do is we can find congruent sides and congruent angles in isosceles triangles using information that we know. So we're going to go ahead and turn the page to page 141. And we're going to do examples 1 through 4. Okay. In exercises 1 through 4, complete the statement. State which theorem you used. And so we have this picture here. We're going to go to each statement and find the congruent pieces in the picture to help us figure out what other pieces have to be congruent. And number 1, it says line segment NJ is congruent to line segment NM. Well, what that tells me here is if I finish this triangle, this pink triangle is isosceles. If these are the two congruent legs of the isosceles triangles, this tells me that these two angles that are opposite the two legs have to be congruent. So this tells us that angle M must be congruent to angle J. And the theorem that says if the legs are congruent, then the base angles are congruent is the base angles theorem. Let's do another one. I'll use a different color this time. Okay. If line segment LM is congruent to line segment LN, okay, so LM is here, and line segment LN is here. I'm going to put 2 tick marks. So now I'm looking at this little triangle right here. If this red triangle is isosceles, I know that because these two sides are congruent. This tells us that the base angles, the angles opposite these two legs, have to be congruent to each other. So this tells us angle M has to be congruent to this angle here. Now I can't just call it angle N because I have multiple angles at this point. So I'm going to need to use 3 letters for this angle. So I'll use 3 angles for both of these to be consistent. So this angle LMN, is congruent to angle LNM. My picture might start looking complicated, so try to ignore the previous stuff I've done, and I'll keep using different colors. Number 3, if angle NKM is congruent to, I just realized we used the base angles theorem for number 2 as well. If angle NKM is congruent to angle NMK, so angle NKM, that's this one here, is congruent to angle NMK. NMK, that's this one. So I'm going to put 2 arcs here. Now this is the triangle we're talking about. We have to figure out if these are the 2 base angles that are congruent, what are the 2 sides of the isosceles triangle that are congruent. So now I'm going to look at my 2 base angles, the sides opposite them. The side opposite this angle would be side MN. And the side opposite this angle would be side KM. N, sorry. So line segment NM must be congruent to line segment KN. And this time, we knew the base angles were congruent, which told us which sides were congruent. So we were using the base angles converse. One more. If angle LJN, this angle here, I already have it marked, is congruent to angle LNJ. LNJ. That's this angle here. Okay. So now we're looking at, I know there's a lot of stuff going on. These are our 2 base angles. Now we're looking at this triangle here, this isosceles triangle. These are our base angles that are congruent. To define the 2 sides that are congruent, we're going to go opposite. The side opposite this yellow angle is side JL, line segment JL. And that has to be congruent to the side opposite angle J, which is this side here, line segment LN. And again, because we were using the base angles to find the congruent sides, we used the base angles converse for number 4 as well.